about how if you want to like predict the kind of person you're going to be or what's going to happen in your life or, what your professional successes are going to look like, the best predictor is to look at the people who you spend the most time with. Who do we want to be in our circle? Who do we want to have influence us? And I think sometimes we don't think about it like that. Like, who do we want to be more like? Because they're going to have an influence on us that we're not totally aware of in the moment.
So at the deepest level, and it's not to say, all of friendship is strategic. It's actually saying something slightly different, which is that in modern life, unlike our ancestors, we have the beautiful and terrifying opportunity to, at some deep level, choose who we pray with or don't, who we dine with or don't. The majority of us are living with, being neighbors with, working with, wedding people who are different from us in some way, shape, or form. And so within that level of choice, what are the values of the people that you spend time with? What are they competing over? Right? I have a friend who says, she was talking about a person and she said, part of her confusion is she doesn't know who her Joneses are. And I said, what do you mean by that? And she said, well, everybody has Joneses. That old saying, like keeping up with the Joneses? Mm-hmm. You can't apparently escape the Joneses, but you can decide who they are. And at some deep sociological, simple, banal level, every set of group has its values, has its norms, has the things that they compete over, has the things that make them laugh. And at some deep level to begin to pause and ask, who do I want to be my Joneses?
I certainly am not going to ask you to like name a person, right? That would be cruel. But I am curious.
That's the B side of this podcast.
Yeah. But like, who are some people where you're like, I don't want these to be my Joneses? One way that I would frame it is like, I like that my people around me are when we have like dinner together, we're bringing maybe not the best looking, but like a home cooked meal rather than buying some sort of really fancy, expensive takeout and bringing that over to someone else's house. And that's not to say that, look, if you love fancy takeout, good for you. But for me, I'm glad that I come home to people who are like, maybe we'll just make some pasta,
Groups have shared questions. And I'm a conflict resolution facilitator and I work with groups. I work with groups that are experiencing some kind of transition or crisis, and help them have the conversations that they've been kind of avoiding having. And one of the things that I find over and over again is that groups are relevant to the people in them when they share the same questions. So, for example, the question might be in one group, how do I make the best arrabbiata pasta known to man? Mm-hmm. And in another group, it might mean in a church, for example, what does closeness to God look like? And part of the opportunity and, at different moments in life, we choose the groups that we are a part of. But there are moments of transition, often, at least in the U.S., after college or, during college or at the kind of quarter life, what's that currently called? The quarter life crisis, 25, like who are my people? Who do I want my people to be? Like, even if you think about your job, like what are the organizations? If I enter an organization, if I enter a tech company, if I enter a art studio, if I enter a museum, at the simplest level, it's like groups carry implicit or explicit questions. And as you are starting to navigate the groups of your life, to think about, is this how I want to be spending my time? I don't know. I'm kind of talking, live here, but do I want to be thinking obsessively about the shape of a collar in this season's fashion show?
Yeah.
Right? For some people, the answer is yes, I absolutely want to be thinking about that shape. And I've been thinking about how the collar shape has changed over 250 years and I finally found my people, right? Or do I want to be thinking about the nature of a changing democracy? Or do I want to be thinking about Pez dispensers and 80s rock bands? I'm at some deep level, when long-term communities start to have shared questions, and contentment in group life is when their questions are also the questions you carry. It's
really interesting that you frame it as shared questions and not shared values, which I know sometimes people talk about in groups. I feel like that's intentional.
I am currently working on my next book, and part of what I'm looking at is looking at long-term sustainable communities, particularly across difference. And again, in traditional communities, our values at some level are passed down, right? My great-grandmother's values, my great-grandfather's values are perhaps the same values as mine, or I've been told they should be. And part of modern life is we can enter and exit as many communities as you want. It's never been easier to exit a church or a synagogue or a mosque. It's never been easier to exit a friendship or a marriage. And so part of what ends up becoming interesting and sustainable is when the way a group spends its times or the questions that it asks, and yes, underlying values are absolutely a part of it, but give kind of a forward momentum. They give a spark and a life that is the opposite of flat. They allow people to kind of know what the collective project is. I remember years ago hearing David Brooks speak, and he said, "No question worthy of pursuit is answerable in a lifetime." And I'm a facilitator. I think of my core craft, like the thing that I have been working on for the last 25 years, is how do you create and structure a conversation within a room that people are trying to avoid but know that they need to have? And how do you do it in a way that creates breakthrough? That, to me, is a question worthy of pursuit.
I really